She checked her phone one more time before falling asleep, not because she had received a message, but because she was still waiting for one. Hours had passed since they last spoke, yet her mind continued trying to justify the silence. Maybe he was busy. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he simply did not know how to express what he felt. And while trying to understand him, she stopped listening to herself. That night, she promised herself she would stop texting first, that she would stop begging for attention, that she would stop staying awake waiting for small signs of love. But the next day, she did it again. Because when a woman begins begging for love, she rarely notices the exact moment she starts abandoning herself. And the most painful part is that many times she is not only begging for a person, she is begging for validation, begging to feel chosen, begging to feel worthy enough to stay, begging because part of her believes that if she loves harder, understands more, tolerates more, eventually she will finally be enough. And little by little, without realizing it, she begins living emotionally exhausted. Because there's no exhaustion more silent than trying to convince someone to give you the love that should come naturally. Many modern women live trapped in this emotional state. They constantly check messages, analyze tone of voice, overthink silence, interpret every emotional shift as if their peace depended on it, and the body begins paying the price. Because emotional rejection does not only hurt the heart, it also affects the nervous system. When a woman lives constantly waiting for attention, validation, or uncertain affection, the brain enters a state of emotional hypervigilance. The nervous system begins behaving as if it were facing a permanent threat, and that creates cortisol, a lot of cortisol. Cortisol is not only connected to physical stress, it also rises during emotional uncertainty, anxious attachment, emotional instability, and the fear of abandonment. The body remains in alert mode. The mind never truly rests. Sleep changes, anxiety increases, and slowly, a woman begins losing something deeply important, her center. Because when your emotional energy depends entirely on another person's attention, you stop belonging to yourself. And perhaps that is why so many women feel unrecognizable after begging too long for love. Because begging slowly destroys identity. You begin accepting things you would never have accepted before. You begin justifying emotional inconsistency. You begin minimizing your own emotional needs just to avoid losing someone. And the more desperately you try to keep love, the more you begin losing yourself. But there is something deeply important to understand. Begging does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks quiet. It looks like waiting for replies that never come. Accepting emotional crumbs. Pretending inconsistency is enough because you are afraid of emptiness. And the problem with emotional starvation is that any small amount of affection begins feeling enormous. Because an emotionally exhausted heart quickly learns how to survive on very little. But emotionally healthy women do not need to chase love desperately. Healthy love does not require convincing someone to value you repeatedly. And perhaps that is one of the hardest lessons many women eventually learn. You cannot force someone to recognize your worth. You cannot love someone hard enough to make them finally choose you. You cannot sacrifice your peace trying to become impossible to leave. Because the real problem was never only that person. The real problem is that many women were taught to associate love with emotional suffering. They learned that love meant waiting, that love meant enduring, that love meant proving their value over and over again. And eventually, the nervous system becomes addicted to emotional chaos. It becomes familiar with uncertainty, familiar with chasing. And when peace finally appears, it can even feel uncomfortable, because a body accustomed to emotional stress often confuses intensity with love. But real love should not destroy your peace. It should not force you to live anxiously. It should not make you feel emotionally unsafe all the time. And this is where many women begin awakening emotionally, when they realize how much pain they tolerated simply because they were afraid of being alone. Because fear of abandonment can keep a woman emotionally begging for years, and the body feels all of it. Anxiety rises. Self-worth decreases. The nervous system remains activated. The heart becomes exhausted. And eventually, a woman begins understanding something important. Letting go is not always losing. Sometimes letting go is recovering. Recovering your calm. Recovering your emotional dignity. Recovering the mental space you once spent obsessing over someone who never truly knew how to care for you. And yes, letting go hurts, because it forces you to accept an uncomfortable truth. You cannot keep abandoning yourself just to avoid being abandoned by others. And perhaps that is where true feminine transformation begins. When a woman stops chasing love and begins returning to herself. Because emotionally healed women slowly change. They no longer check their phones with constant anxiety. They no longer interpret silence as proof of their worth. They no longer live desperately needing to feel chosen. They begin choosing themselves. And that changes everything. Because emotional peace begins the moment a woman stops placing her value in the hands of people incapable of holding it gently. And no, that does not mean becoming cold. It does not mean stopping love. It means stopping the need to beg for what should flow naturally. There is a profound difference between loving deeply and emotionally starving for love. Wise women eventually learn that difference. They learn that their energy deserves protection too. They learn that peace is more valuable than emotional obsession. They learn that the most important love is not the one you desperately chase. It is the one that allows you to feel safe inside yourself. Because emotionally exhausted women do not need more empty promises. They need rest. They need nervous system healing. They need to remember who they were before they started begging for attention. And perhaps today, you need to hear this. You are not difficult to love. You are not too emotional. You are not insufficient. You have simply spent too long trying to receive love from people incapable of offering it properly. And the day a woman stops begging, something inside her finally becomes quiet, because she realizes her peace matters more than unstable love. She realizes her nervous system deserves calm. She realizes she no longer wants to survive emotionally. And from that place, she slowly rebuilds herself with more dignity, more calmness, more self-respect, because the woman who stops begging recovers her peace. And if this message found you at the right moment in your life, subscribe to Sophia Stoica. This is a space for women seeking emotional clarity, nervous system healing, inner strength, and a wiser way to live and love. Because calm is power.